Hey, I'm Fred.
And I'm Ant.
And this is Creator Generation.
Create a generation of hype.
This week, something a little bit different. We're chatting with Branden Harvey, who was one of the first people on Instagram and Snapchat and built a huge following there.
I ended up getting nominated for a Shorty Award 2 years in a row, which is like an internet Grammy for Snapchatter of the Year. I ended up losing 2 years in a row, but I lost to DJ Khaled and Kylie Jenner, which is like the dream.
He's now started a media company dedicated to all the good things in the world. So, if you want to feel good, this is one for you.
Frederico, before we get started, we've been working really hard in the background on our own online course called Change Your College, the online college just for content creators. Check it out at
changercollege.com. That's CHANGER college.com.
Let's get into it. Branden Harvey, welcome to Creator Generation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
It's awesome to have you. I do a terrible introduction if I ever try it, so I've stopped trying. Can you please introduce who you are?
Yeah, I am Branden. I am a storyteller focused on the good in the world. I think that we live in a time where I think a lot of us feel really overwhelmed by a lot of things happening in the world. And so I've been just doing my best to share the stories that I'm coming across in the world of people creating solutions to problems, people making a difference in the world's problems, and ultimately using those to help motivate myself and hopefully others to find ways to make a difference in their communities as well.
That's awesome. You say you're a storyteller. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I've gone through a lot of mediums through the years, and to be honest, when I first got started, it was photography, and I assumed that I would be a photographer for the rest of my life. I had the photographers that I admired and wanted to become more like. I saw the trajectory, and I had an idea in mind of like what it meant to be a successful photographer. And the closer that I got to that point, the closer that I got to achieving that goal of that dream, I guess, the more I realized that I was not passionate at all about that particular avenue. And so I started exploring like, what would it look like to maybe see what else I'm interested in? And I started playing around with video and writing and social media and all these different things, and realizing that maybe from the beginning, my passion didn't truly lie with photography as a medium, just that photography was a great tool for storytelling. And so it's actually been, years of kind of unpacking what I thought was the trajectory for my life and for myself as a creator. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, I really am a storyteller across a bunch of different things. I would say that the main ways that I'm trying to tell stories are through writing, through social media, through photo and video storytelling. But the reality is somebody's going to invent something crazy, like a way for like a chip that goes on our brains that, we can tell stories through. Like maybe that's where I'll start telling stories, or, maybe it'll be VR, or, who knows what's next. But I'm wide open to the possibilities as long as I get to focus on stories that matter and mean something.
I love that. And I love that you're not tied to one medium, rather than the purpose and then the most engaging and interesting way, both for you and probably then what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that I had people who modeled that for me really well. I think about the photographers I follow who, they got their start in design, or the YouTubers who, were by an artist, and then they decided to start documenting that process. And I feel like that's the stuff that gets me really excited, is when people can bring talent from across different crafts and bring it together in one shared thing like that. That's what kind of energizes me. And so I try to do the same thing for myself.
Can I ask, you mentioned before that you started with photography and then you realized that you didn't want to do that. What's it like when you get to that point, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be my life, and then you realize that's something you just don't want to do? Yeah,
and maybe I'll clarify and say that it's not that I didn't want to do it, because I still do it and I still really enjoy it, but I I realized it wasn't my everything. It wasn't what I had made it out to be. It wasn't what I expected that it would be. And I think that was a really tricky thing because I think I built my identity around that, both publicly, like my Facebook page was called Branden Harvey Photography. My website was brandenharveyphotography.com. But also internally, I was like, that's where my value comes from. That's what people know me as. If I shoot a better photo, perhaps I'm a better person. And at least, if I shoot a better photo, I'm more worthy of getting a better paycheck, things like that. And I think it was, it almost sounds over dramatic, but it really was something where I had to deconstruct that from my identity. I think it was really freeing when I still realized like maybe I am a creator at my core. Like I'll always try to create something out of nothing. But I don't have to be restricted to one medium, and also I don't have to be restricted to climbing one mountain. Sometimes you get in an industry and you can see the people at the top of that industry and you see what it could look like to be at the top of that. And I certainly had that with photography. I knew exactly the photographers I wanted to be like. I knew what it would look like if I was at the top, when I hit the age of 50 or 60, and I knew the steps to get there. And then deconstructing that and realizing like, oh, there's a bunch of mountains, but also I can build my own. Like I can create something completely new. And it doesn't have to be something that it doesn't have to be a trail that somebody else has already forged. I can kind of forge a new trail. The other thing is, I would say, as much as it's freeing, it's also terrifying. Like it's so scary to think, oh crap, like maybe there's not a YouTube tutorial on how to do this thing I want to do. Maybe there's not a clear path set in stone. And I guess I'm trying to figure out what that looks like.
Just so a listener can sort of go, great, like he's had this revelation. We sort of backtrack a bit to maybe like where it started for you in, as a creator. And I think, a creator and gaining an audience or some influence, or community, however you want to look at it. But like that for you, that started on Instagram, right, with your photography.
Yeah, well, Instagram was really where it all blew up. But for me, it started back in the day on Flickr and Twitter. When I was like a 15-year-old, I took a photography class in my high school. And as a part of that, I got a free camera to use for an entire year. I could take it home on the weekends. I could use it at night and in the mornings and take it to school. And I started to really take it seriously. I think a lot of people, kind of take that class and they just, they do the assignments, they have fun with the photos. But I really saw it as like this big opportunity for me. And I started to look on websites like Flickr and Twitter to find other people who were taking photography really seriously, and especially young people, because I was a 15-year-old kid in a small rural farm town, and our style, this was early 2000s, but the style of photography was like stuck in the 80s in my town. There was nobody who was shooting in like a modern contemporary way. Everything had the blurry filter over it and over edited, and it was not what was inspiring me. So I was looking for other people who maybe were in other small towns doing the same thing, and I found this community of people and all these other like 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds who were trying to shoot amazing photos, and I started connecting with them and started to realize that the internet was an amazing place to make connections with people and to find people who were like-minded, and started kind of building out an audience on those platforms first. But it was hard because Flickr always did feel like a photo storage site. And then Twitter, was really more for people to share words than photos. Back then, you couldn't even share photos on Twitter without using a secondary source like a Shutterfly or TwitPic or something. And so that's where I was kind of connecting with people. But when Instagram came along, and it was really the first photo-based social network, it felt like cheating because it was just so easy to like share photos as a photographer. I was already shooting photos I was proud of, and at that time I was, I had a professional camera, but I I really wanted to stay like pure on Instagram, for lack of a better word. And so I was shooting iPhone photos only and just trying to shoot the best iPhone photos I could. And I had just moved to a bigger urban city from this small town. And I was really exploring the idea of like what it was like to move to a city that was the exact opposite of everything that I had known growing up. And I like to think that if I'd grown up in, this urban city of Portland, Oregon, that it would have been equally valuable for me to move to a rural town to kind of have that opposite experience. But I took that as an opportunity to start telling stories of these people who I was encountering who were so different than everything I had known growing up on Instagram through iPhone photos. And something about it started to really cut through the noise. Perhaps it was that I was cheating by being a professional photographer when most people were just taking pictures of their lattes and their shoes, or maybe it was the fact that I had this interesting perspective of moving to a city that was the opposite of what I had known and having a different way of looking at things, or maybe it was the way that I was focusing on telling stories in the captions and through photos. And so something started to gain traction, and I started to gain a pretty decent audience, and it started to snowball. And before you know it, I started getting featured by, I think it was like Fortune magazine and Mashable, and then Instagram started featuring me on their blog and highlighting what I was doing. And that was when I first started to things started to really gain traction, and I started to build this audience. And it was in the early days of Instagram still. And so I was, one of the first people to kind of start having a K next to their name, meaning that I had, I think more than 10,000 followers. You get a 10K, and then it was 11K and 12K. And so I was part of this early stage of the internet where people were gaining followers quickly and trying to figure out, what do you do with this? What do you do when you have a community looking to you and you have the opportunity to influence people? I never heard the word influencer before, but I knew that it was maybe an opportunity to do something good with it. And so I didn't have the answers, but I knew that I wanted to figure out what to do with that, and also just continue to reach more people and tell more stories that mattered to me. But it really did ultimately start out on Instagram as this unique, weird platform that we were all just using on our phones with random iPhone photos.
It's such a good story and insight into the early days of Insta and also your early days there. And I think particularly like the storytelling aspect that you've always brought. It's quite. I didn't quite realize that was something you had from the very start of Insta, which is incredibly interesting to hear.
When as a quick little aside, so for the longest time, Instagram had almost unlimited caption length. And then at one point they cut the caption length pretty significantly, and they made it also so that if you had more than 3 lines of a caption, you'd have to click the more button, which we have now on Instagram, to view it. And one of the first employees at Instagram actually sent me an email the day before that came out. And they're like, "Hey, Brandon, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but you're going to have to make your captions shorter. We're changing a setting. I just wanted you to know." And I felt very flattered that they were cutting the caption length, which made sense because it was too long. It was like blog post style. And they thought to tell me as one of the first people. That's how I knew that I needed to maybe shorten my captions a little bit.
How long were your captions before that?
I mean, I thought it was like a blog post. I was like, I don't know how to get people because I had BrandonHarveyPhotography.com or whatever at the time. And I didn't know how to get people to go to my website. And so, there were no swipe up links on stories or anything. And so I was just like, well, I'll just post a little caption here. And people connected with it and they were reading it. I wonder if I go back to some of those captions, if they're cut off or not now, or if they got grandfathered in. I've got no clue.
You mentioned before that obviously your photos got noticed. A lot of people think about, photography being a pretty straightforward thing. You point and you shoot and you can take a good photo. But what was it about your sort of artistic eye that made you unique and that made people pay attention?
Well, I mean, one thing that I'll say that was kind of cheating was that I lived in Portland, Oregon, which is, arguably one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Like we're an hour from the mountain, an hour from the ocean, which is a beautiful part of the West Coast. We're right within range of all this hiking. And so I had access to a lot of beautiful spaces that, I think a lot of people, would travel to Portland to shoot photos, and I just lived there every day. So I think that part was cheating. But I do think that I was coming in and shooting things from a perspective that felt different. I think I've always been pretty aware of cliches, and sometimes I lean into them and I'm like, this is something that everybody's doing and I want to do it too. But I think in those days I really was seeing a lot of cliches and was trying to do something always just a little bit different. And I'm sure I would scroll back through my Instagram now and cringe at a lot of the things I shared, but I think at the time it was always just trying to figure out how to bring something fresh to this app that was still so new and there was so much to be explored. And it really was, people were shooting specifically photos on the iPhone, and it was so people would be so surprised when you would say oh no, I actually shot this on an iPhone. We were pushing this camera to its limits. I was shooting on the iPhone 4S. And now, the iPhone 11 has 3 lenses that are incredible, and, they're filming commercials and everything on them. But at the time we were fighting to try to make this camera work the best that it could. And so I think that a lot of it was just, me and the other people who were kind of getting noticed at the time, we were just trying different things. We were trying to push the limit where we could.
It's an interesting area because one of the big things we tell people is you don't have to have a super expensive camera or a lot of high-tech equipment to do good stuff and make great content. And we love showing examples of people like yourself who can go out there and create really great content on what you have with you, which is like an iPhone or a smartphone.
Exactly. I mean, there's a famous quote that is, the best camera is the one that's with you. It doesn't matter if I've got a really nice camera at home, if I can't shoot the photo right then and there. So use the best photo you can, or take the best photo you can with what you have. And that is the best, that's what you're looking for. And, as soon as you start to feel limited by something, if you've got an idea in your mind of something you could create, but you were genuinely limited by what your device is capable of, then buy a new camera, and then start keeping that one with you. But until then, until you're maxing out that experience, it's not super necessary to have a top of the line nice camera or to be the best at photography.
You mentioned that obviously people everywhere on Instagram seem to take the same set of photos, photos of their food or smiling with their friends. What makes your stuff less cliched?
Part of it is just being aware of the cliches. I'm a lot less likely to just take a photo of a latte, top down type photo these days. I'm a little bit less likely to take the same photo of a bridge in Portland that's been taken a bunch of times. Not because I feel like I'm better than people or because I think that it's bad to take that photo. It's just, it's not as inspiring or interesting for me creatively. So I'm not going to spend my attention on it. I think that the best thing is to just not feel like there are things that you have to do. I think that a lot of people feel like their Instagram has to be this perfectly, monochromatic, consistently styled Instagram account. And the reality is that's just not true. What people want is they want consistency from you. They want to know what to expect from you, but they're not looking for your feed to look like every other popular Instagrammer's feed. They want it to represent who you are and what you do. And so figure out what you care about and lean into consistency. I think that's what matters. And so for me, the most consistent thing is that I try to share heartfelt captions that are going to connect with people on a deep level. I try to be real and be fully myself. And most recently that's meant having a little bit less good photos. I think that for maybe a year or so was so focused on perfection on my feed that I wasn't sharing as much as I wanted to, or when I was sharing, maybe it wasn't as authentic as it could be. And I'm not here to just like get a bunch of likes. I'm here to have connections with people. And so I saw that as a hindrance. And so I was like, I had a big life change. My wife and I moved across the country, and I was thinking like, okay, what's going to be the post to kind of say that, we made it, we're in this new city. And I sat on it for a few weeks and, kept on looking at photos. I was like, this isn't quite good enough. And then one day I was like, screw it. I just want to tell people that I moved. I want to have this connecting point of having a new experience and a new challenge and life changing. I think that we can all relate to that. And so I was, on the bus on the way downtown with my wife, and I snapped a selfie on my, front facing camera, and there's randos in the background and my smile is a little bit off. And I was like, screw it, I'm posting it right now. And I posted it before we got to our bus stop. And I'm sure a million people have taken the same selfie. But for me, what I was, my goals had changed. My goal was be real, share something that's true, don't overthink it. And so hopefully that's what comes through. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I mean that's such a big thing. The difference between someone like yourself and like a lot of people who just put up stuff on Instagram is that idea of connection. That thing that people don't really realize is how they connect with the audience. And like having a look at obviously your Instagram and how that look, your profile and how it looks. It's really well done because every photo has that feel and that connection there. And I think that's consistency is there, and you see that enough, and you start to build that. And people sometimes don't understand you can do that through something like Instagram as well. They think, with video, you can connect with the audience in a different way, but you can absolutely do that with things like Insta as well. And I think you've nailed that. And it's a really interesting area because it's something that's overlooked. A lot of the audience think they oversimplify it, and they are, it's just a photo, but there's so much more to it than that. I noticed as well that you're followed by someone, an account I also look at called This Wild Idea, and he.
That's Theron Humphrey. Theron and I were neighbors in Nashville. He's been on my podcast.
Right.
He's got an incredible Instagram.
I love that account, but it's the same. It's it's him and his dog.
The dog,
right? Yeah, the dog one. Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
Maddie.
Yeah, and it's brilliant, but it's all these photos of him and his dog around the place, and it's same, but it's consistent. But at the same time, there's so much connection there. Like every time you look at that photo, you're like, that's amazing. I feel like so connected to what he's doing. And I think that's what.
And Theron has really led that movement, in my opinion. He's done such an incredible job because people started following him initially because he had a cute dog, but Theron is a true artist who wants to have true connections and really help people. And he didn't want to just be limited to a dog account. And I love that you mentioned that he's got a dog, but you didn't say like, there's this dog I follow. He really is somebody who's living an adventure and bringing you into that experience. And that's what he wants to share with you on Instagram. And his adventure happens to include this dog. And he's one of my favorite storytellers, and I admire him a whole lot.
It's like an ongoing buddy story. Like
exactly right. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones. But it is a big thing. This idea of connection and people oversimplifying the idea of how it's hard to do that on Instagram. You absolutely can, and people can create that. And I think it's something people need to understand a little bit more clearly. Is that it's not just about snapping a nice shot, but snapping something that's more meaningful and connecting. Because at the end of the day, you're still competing for attention like anywhere else, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things where sometimes I think that we let it get a little too abstract because there are big numbers on the internet. But just because I've got a big number next to my name, every single person who follows me is an individual human. And Instagram, you don't just gain a large following, you gain a large number of individual people who are choosing to dedicate a moment, a piece of their one wild and precious life to you. And so I really do try to focus on creating one-on-one connections. And sometimes that's done en masse by being like, here's something true from my life. If it's true for your life too, like, I hope that this helps you feel less alone. I hope that this leaves you feeling encouraged. And sometimes it's literally, one-on-one DMs back and forth, or it's caption, or it's commenting back and forth. And I think that's something that I've grown in my realization of through the years, is just every single person who follows you it's just another human being. And so one of the biggest things that I lean into is the idea of like, it's the golden rule. It's like, if you want to grow on Instagram, if you want to connect with more people, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And you can get really cheesy about it. It's like, you go on Instagram and what do you want? You want that little red pop-up in the bottom right corner to say that you got some new comments and some new followers and some new likes. And so go and do that for other people. Don't just keep on following the same people. Go follow some new people. Don't just double tap on somebody's photo. Like, leave a meaningful comment. Tell them how what they shared connected with you. And that's ultimately how you're going to build relationships and build more followers and build, a connection with people, is ultimately to put yourself out there and to, try to actually connect one-on-one, like we're doing in this conversation, or like you do when you sit down across the table from somebody over coffee.
It's so clear, and it's kind of like, it's not something you hear enough probably, and it's kind of like, as you're saying that, it's like, yeah, of course, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it's hard, because I think that there's a lot of things working against that mentality, and a lot of things being sold that make you not want to think about people that way. But I don't know. I don't know what kind of shifted for me, and it's not like I've got that all figured out and unlocked. But something shifted where I knew that I didn't want to play the numbers game anymore. And honestly, I can't compete in the numbers game. I've been stuck at the same amount of followers for years now. I'm not growing at the same rate that I used to. And I don't think I want to. Like, I don't think that I want to be growing indefinitely. And I know that I'm not going to compete with like the cute people who have 1 million followers. And again, I don't think I want to. And so what can I do? I can create meaningful connections with people. And it's the idea that so many people have talked about, of all you need is 1,000 true fans. And that's getting into like the business tactical side, but I think we all want to know others and be known. And if that's the legacy that I can try to leave through social media, then that's where I want to be.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I want to get to that, I guess the business side, or
yeah,
in down the track, but I also want to keep diving into your progression to where you are now.
Oh yeah, because a lot's even shifted from there.
Yeah. And like when we first met, I think it was probably like maybe 4 years ago, and you were really like, to simplify it down, you were known as the Snapchat guy.
That's right. I forgot about this.
But you were like,
you forgot about Snapchat?
Yeah, forgot about Snapchat.
What happened?
Yeah, we all have.
Like you were, I think, probably one of the early adopters on to Snapchat, or one of the early people to sort of gain some traction there.
Yeah.
Like what brought you onto Snapchat once that sort of popped up?
Yeah, I think for me it was, I'd kind of seen on Instagram that while a lot of people were using Instagram to just post a moment, which is what I think Instagram is for, and I had found a creative way of posting a story, of sharing a narrative, and I felt like I kind of hacked the system, and that's what maybe helped me stand out. I saw Snapchat, and at first I was like, oh, what is this terrible sexting app that everybody's using? I saw it as this thing that I was like, I don't want anything to do with this terrible app. And then I started to hear about a few people who were using it differently, and a few people who were using it to push boundaries and try new things from a storytelling or creative standpoint. And when I saw that, then it immediately changed for me. I was like, oh, this is a platform to tell stories. And I'm not just a photographer. I'm not just an Instagrammer. I'm a storyteller. And so what if I I took this as a creative challenge to tell stories on here. And so I literally challenged myself to, at first, just create one compelling story every day for 30 days. Just use the tool to create something entertaining that people would want to watch. And I did it for 30 days and I loved it. I felt so creatively alive. It was so fun to get to be a little bit goofy and playful on the internet. And I kind of played around with being a filmmaker and kind of directing some stuff. And to be honest, I realized that I did not like the editing, the post-processing, the post-production stuff that went into that. And Snapchat was all the fun of directing without any editing, because you just had to post it live. And then the great thing was when it was inevitably crappy, like when what you created was bad, it would expire 24 hours later. And so you would never have to feel too tied to it, but it would also be a challenge. You know, at the end of 24 hours, you've got nothing to show for your accomplishments. So you've got to go out and make something new. And so I extended my challenge to myself to 365 days. And I kept to that. I probably missed a few days in there, but I committed to basically telling a bunch of stories over the course of a year. And that was a wild experience. And through that, I ended up gaining a lot of followers. I think because I was doing something unique, something consistent, and something hopefully, you know, brought value to people's days. And because of that, I ended up like as one of the top Snapchatters on Snapchat, which is so funny now because I'm doing effectively the opposite of that. But I ended up getting nominated for Shorty Award 2 years in a row, which is like an internet Grammy, for a lack of a better word, and for Snapchatter of the Year. And I ended up losing 2 years in a row, but I lost to DJ Khaled and Kylie Jenner, which is like the dream. Like that's how you lose an award, in my opinion. You know, I can die happy. And so Snapchat took me on all kinds of random crazy adventures. And I checked the app the other day. I re-downloaded it, logged in, still remembered my password, and I posted to kind of see how many followers I had. And I still actually have more viewers on Snapchat than Instagram. So Snapchat isn't dead. It's just it's a totally different group of people. It's probably teenagers, and it's not necessarily the people I'm trying to reach anymore, but it's still going strong. And I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to learn so much about storytelling and the creative process from trying to be a storyteller on a new platform.
Do you also, with Snapchat, do you think that was a really big stepping stone for you in the direction that you're taking about, you know, creating positive content, like and positive stories?
I think so. I think to some degree I saw Snapchat as a place that was a little slimy and a little negative. And I thought maybe I could show up and be the person bringing a little bit more positivity to this platform. But I also saw it as an evolution in me seeing what I can do as being multi-platform. You know, I think that even before I jumped over to Snapchat, as I was an Instagrammer who was doing a lot more writing, and I still really do think that I thought of myself as a photographer, and I would have never considered trying other platforms that didn't rely on my photography abilities. And Snapchat basically had 0% reliance on my photography. I couldn't upload photos to it. It wouldn't let you do stuff like that. The Snapchat camera sucked. The filters were terrible. You know, it was all these things that were the opposite. And I was like, oh, I've found a little bit of success with this. Maybe my identity is even bigger than I thought. And I think that was also one of the most helpful things for me.
Because Snapchat was the place where you could, or you almost were forced to put yourself more in your content as well, rather than
and it was that. I will say that's something that I guess I haven't talked about it that much, but that was the most terrifying part for me. You know, I am an extrovert. I do like being goofy, but I have such a hard time doing stuff like that's too out there. But like I would go through and I would like keep track of my analytics and stuff, and I would see which stories were kind of performing the best and what people liked the most. And what people liked the most was when you would do something embarrassing, basically. And I had this one segment one time where I still like get like butterflies in my stomach thinking about how nervous I was doing it. But I did this segment where I would run around town interviewing people. And I was like wearing a goofy jumpsuit, and I was holding a microphone and putting it in people's faces and filming them and saying like, what do you think about, and I don't even remember what I was asking them about, something interesting, hopefully. And I wasn't trying to be like rude or like I was trying to create something positive with these people. Like I wasn't trying to like prank people, but the microphone wasn't plugged into anything. So it was like this, 20-foot long cord that was just dangling on the ground behind me. That was basically the joke of it. And that's just because like it was a props that I happened to find in my house. And basically recording the reactions to that in a playful, fun way. And it went wild. Like it blew up as much as things can on Snapchat. But I was the most nervous I'd ever been in my life because it required me doing this embarrassing thing in front of strangers. And I can think of time after time when I would do stuff like this. And I started getting paid to do things like this for brands and different people who wanted to, tell unique stories on Snapchat. And I remember one time I was in New York City in Times Square, and I was about to do something super embarrassing like that. And I remember just like sitting like on those giant red steps in Times Square with like my head between my knees because I was like gonna throw up from what I was about to do, some embarrassing thing where I was gonna talk to strangers. And it really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And I'm really proud of myself for doing it. But that was the other thing, is it was such a funny challenge to be like, all right, if I want to create something, it's going to take this weird personal sacrifice. And, that was just this dorky Snapchat thing, but I think that it's carried through to help me, it almost sounds cheesy to say, but like, I do feel like it's helped me take on more challenges in other creative aspects of my life.
That's awesome. It's funny that you say, these things that you were doing sometimes were really, freaking you out and taking you out of your comfort zone, because I distinctly to this day, which you probably don't remember, was we were chatting outside with a conference. It was just yourself, your wife, and me just having a chat about what
I 100% remember this. Yeah.
And we were talking, and this red balloon floated past outside on the breeze, and you just took off as fast as you could.
That's so funny.
Jumping and screaming and sort of like it was like the joy of a 3-year-old when they have a balloon, which is like the ultimate joy you could possibly have. And I was kind of like, I think we'd met the day before for the first time, and then we were sort of like, having a more chat, a longer chat, and your wife was, hey, yeah, he just does that. And and you grabbed your phone and you created a story, and you came back maybe like 10-15 minutes later, and it was like, that's it, that's my story for today. And
that's it, that's exactly it.
And then you were
I was
like,
cool, I'm good.
And then you sat down and you were like, all right, so where were we? Yeah, okay. Like nothing had happened. And I was like, cool, I'm down with this. Like, yep. Your wife was like, yeah.
I completely forgot about that moment, but I fully believe that. That's so funny.
It's burned into my brain. It's just like,
wow,
great sort of. For me, it's sort of like being like that association with you and like that joy and positivity that you sort of were like. It's such a simple thing of a balloon floating through the air, but you sort of just pared it back down to like, yeah, it is really interesting. Like, in a beautiful sunny day, chase down a floating balloon and grab it and tell people what's going on. Like, it's just so the simple joy of it. But that's just burned into my brain. And like when you say, I was nervous about doing some crazy stuff in public, I'm like, oh, okay, all right, sure.
That's
you didn't
funny.
show it. Yeah.
Good. Well, yeah, part of it is I think I just felt safe with you, but the other thing was it really was, I did treat it like a job, and it was like every day I got to go out and make something, and the things that are going to do the best are going to be the most embarrassing things. And so it fully makes sense that I came back and was like, cool, that's my story for the day. Because that's the great thing is like, after I get that story for the day, then I was able to not have my phone out the rest of the day and just be fully present, because I didn't create 5 stories a day. I created 1 story a day. So I would usually try to knock it out before noon so that the rest of the day I could be fully present, not have to outline or brainstorm or look for an opportunity to create something new. But it's, and so, I perhaps saw chasing a balloon as a very easy out that allowed me to not have to do something embarrassing later that night at like one of the after parties or something.
Fred, let's take a quick break here and just give ourselves a big plug. We are super excited by this new initiative. We have created the Changer Creator College.
The Creator College, quite simply, is a place where you can get a whole bunch of online courses, including our brand new Accelerate course for YouTube, designed to help emerging and new creators become even better on the world's biggest video platform. The reason we think it's pretty good is that it's not just our opinions, but the opinions of a bunch of really great creators and experts coming together to give you a very logical, structured course.
Damn right. It is the college just for creators. So check it out at
changercollege.com. That's CHANGER college.com. You must have a bunch of different things you do to make money around this, right? And I think everyone's sort of dream as a creator, or I guess as an influencer, is to earn a living from doing what they love. How does it work for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've gone through a lot of evolutions through the years on how I get paid. But one of the best pieces of advice I got early on was to really make sure that I had a lot of revenue sources all at once in case something drops out. You'll always have kind of some other things to keep you afloat. And that's kind of the golden secret to working for yourself. And it fully makes sense to me, because there was a point where, one day I was getting a bunch of Snapchat gigs, which is still so funny to say. And then the next day, Snapchat wasn't in anymore. Like basically as soon as Instagram made their own stories platform, every brand basically, except for ones that were specifically targeting teens, they were like, oh, we're not going to focus on, trying to build an audience on Snapchat when we can just do the same thing on Instagram. And so that whole revenue source dried up immediately. But it was great because I still had photography and public speaking and consulting and Instagram brand partnerships and all these different things. And so I've always tried to have multiple revenue sources coming in. But I think that they're always predicated on the things that the stories that I want to tell. And sometimes it just so happens that I am able to help a brand tell stories, or help another creator tell stories better, or speak on a stage and help use storytelling to communicate an idea that matters. And so I feel very privileged to get to, for probably 90% of my work, do things that I really like. And for that other 10, I will gladly accept that as the payment for having to, for getting the privilege of doing things that I really am passionate about for my job.
One thing we spoke about years ago at an event, which is really prophetic at the time, was when you were just big on Snapchat. Was you gave a bunch of advice to like a crowd of creators at a live event about building your own database. When I'm pretty sure you said, you never know, Snapchat might not be what it is today. So that, like, what did you do around that? Like when you were, on these platforms earlier, to build your own audience and have them in your sphere?
Yeah. So, I had seen creators who were on Snapchat and they were trying to move to YouTube and they were having such a hard time, or, I had seen the challenges I'd had with doing stuff on Snapchat and also Instagram at the same time, and realizing that, I knew that it was only a matter of time, and then it happened that, Instagram would introduce an algorithm and all these things. And, on any platform, you never really have full access to your audience. And I'll never stop playing the game. Like I'll never stop jumping onto new platforms and seeing what kind of creative ways I can connect with people. Right now, I'm really enjoying TikTok. I'm not really making anything myself, but it's like so fun to follow people on TikTok, and it's such a cool platform that you can't tell stories like that anywhere else. You can only do it on that platform, which is amazing. But I saw that, and I kind of knew, like, at the end of the day, you have to find a way to reach people that is at least a little bit more consistent. And so for me, that was email. It was saying, what would it look like for me to figure out how to kind of stay in touch with all these people over email, but not in a way where it's just I only talk to them when I want to sell them things. Maybe it can be a little bit more like social media, where I share things that hopefully add value to people's lives, make them feel less alone, more connected, more capable of going out and doing the things they want to do in the world. And so I started what at the time was called the Branden Harvey email party, where you go to, brightenharvey.com/whatever. And, you could sign up, and every single week I would send out some positivity. And over time that transitioned over into something that we still do today, which is called the Good Newsletter, where every single week we send out 5 pieces of good news from around the world to help you leave or enter your day feeling more hopeful and ready to become part of the good in the world. And that's been such a remarkable thing. And it's incredible because, we're able to build a community of people who have these shared values, have these shared connections, but an algorithm is never going to get in the way of them finding this content that they signed up to get. They want these good news stories. And even if Instagram gets hacked by North Korea tomorrow and gets shut down, like, they're still going to get those good news stories. And that would be very bad news. But hopefully, maybe then you need that good news. So it's, that's the beautiful thing about having, a direct relationship with your audience through something that's not social media is, you can always reach people for the things that they signed up for, and then they can always unsign up if they don't want that thing anymore. But it's a lot more one-on-one. And I definitely encourage every creator to figure out, what does it look like to connect with people on somewhere where you have a little bit more ownership than, the whims of Mark Zuckerberg and whatever changes he wants to make.
So on that, how did you go about building that?
To be honest, I did it in the most, just the easiest, freest way possible. I did something that I'm sure is illegal or unethical. It's probably not that, it's just dumb. I posted on Instagram and I said, hey, who wants to get some good news in their email tomorrow? I feel pretty overwhelmed by what's going on in the world right now. I've been wanting to do an email newsletter for a long time. I'm going to just figure out a way to send an email to everybody and create some positivity who's in. And then I said, comment with your comment with your email address and I'll add you to the list. And so I think that I went and deleted it recently because I was just thinking about it, but everybody was just loading up my comments with their email address, and I was just copy and pasting them directly into MailChimp. MailChimp gives you your first 2,000. They're not sponsoring me. I wish that they were. MailChimp, if you're listening, please give me money. But your first 2,000 subscribers are free. And I was like, cool. I don't think I'll get 2,000, and we got 2,000 in a month or two. And then I had to start paying money for this. But it was amazing. So I just started posting it on Instagram and was like, hey, yesterday we shared this good news story. If you want to get good news stories next week, send me your email. We'll get you signed up. And did that on Twitter, and eventually created a page on my site, which, allowed people to sign up. And it was as easy as that. But what would never work is for me to say, hey, everybody, I started a newsletter, sign up. Nobody wants another email in their inbox, and certainly not if you don't know what it is. But if I tell you that every Tuesday you're going to get 5 pieces of good news, you either want that good news or you don't, but there's no mystery to it. And so I'm basically promising to bring value to people every week. And I think there's a lot of people who do that. I think about one of my favorite musicians, goes by the name of Sleeping at Last. Ryan O'Neal is the guy behind it. And Ryan sends out an email every single time he writes a new song, which is often. He probably writes more music per year than most musicians. And every email explains the behind the scenes of the song. And, musicians eat it up. They love it. They are signing up to get all of that information on the nitty gritty of bringing the song to life and who the collaborators were and what the process was. And so that's such a cool thing where you're opting in and you know what you're going to get in return. And I think everybody has the ability to do that. And again, it comes back to that idea that we were talking about with social media of being consistent and allowing people to know what to expect and bringing value to people's lives to help them feel less alone, more connected, and more empowered to do what they want to do.
With the what is now the Good newsletter, is that then what started what the good? Like, maybe tell me about that.
Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, so the Good newsletter started to take off, and it was people who, it was my audience who was signing up, but also it was thousands of people who had no clue who I was, and they don't care who I was. And I was like, oh, a lot of people need this. And as a part of kind of I guess we kind of skipped over this part, but a big part of me as a photographer, when I was a professional photographer, was traveling around the world as a humanitarian photographer, helping nonprofits tell stories of the impact that they were making around the world. And I would come home just jazzed by all these stories of people making such a profound difference in the world. And I felt so encouraged and hopeful, and it inspired me to figure out, okay, how can I make a difference in the world? And I was looking around and realizing that many people are not seeing all of these reasons to feel hopeful. That it's hard when you don't see the good happening in the world. It neurologically makes you feel more cynical, more apathetic, because you haven't seen others showcasing that change is possible. All you see is the bad news, which is real and powerful and difficult, but you haven't seen the way that people are responding to that bad news and how they can actually change that bad news and create something good in the midst of that. They can create a solution to that problem. And so I was like, well, I have the privilege of seeing all of these stories of solutions. What if I start dedicating my time and energy into sharing these things? And so that was part of the newsletter. But as lots of people started signing up who didn't even know who I was, that was when I realized, this is something that people are craving. People want this really bad. And I thought it was just me and my crew, and all of a sudden it was this bigger group of people. And so then the question became, how can I bring more value to this group of people? How can I help them on their journey to celebrate more good news and then ultimately become a part of the solution and become good news? And so that's when the idea came to launch a podcast. And so we decided to start a podcast, and by we, I mean me and my producer friend, and he helped do the editing and get this thing live, and we launched a podcast where we interviewed people who are making a difference in the world. And that was really successful. It really blew up, and people really connected with it. And so then the question became, all right, well, what next? And we started just asking our audience, what do you need? What would help? And we realized that, email's great, but it doesn't always cut through the noise, and it's a little bit, it's harder to share with people. You can of course forward an email, but you don't always want to do that. And the podcast is great, but it's a bit of a commitment. And we also realized maybe we wanted to help people, almost surprise people with good news, show up with good news in places where they weren't expecting it. And one thing led to another, and the idea of creating a print publication came around, where we were like, this is something that you could, if we create a print publication filled with good news, then somebody can give it to you when you need good news, or you can give it as a gift when somebody else needs good news. If they're in copy shops all over the world, then maybe, you show up at a coffee shop and you stumble across good news right when you need it most. And neurologically, flipping through a print publication will slow you down enough to actually absorb that good news on a deeper level. And then we're like, okay, well, how should we do this? Should we make a Kinfolk magazine, or like an Offset, or something like that? And it just seemed logistically really difficult. And there were people already doing things like that so well that we were like, I just don't know if we can create something interesting and new within that space. And I always wanted to challenge myself creatively. And so then we're like, well, what about a newspaper? We've got the good news letter. What if we start a good news paper? And we start kind of laughing, because it's a dumb idea to make a newspaper at a time when every other newspaper is like shutting down production. And I just started doing some research on it, and I was like, I think we should give this a try. And so we decided to launch this thing on Kickstarter, and just see what happens. And we did, and I was super nervous. I was terrified to see what would happen, and launched this with shaky hands, like hit the publish button. And within 56 hours, we were fully funded. Within 30 days, we had doubled our campaign goal. And by the end of the year, we had shipped probably 50,000 newspapers around the world to all 50 states and more than a dozen countries. And actually, for those who are watching on the YouTube channel, this is the Good Newspaper. We've created this beautiful print newspaper filled with good news. It's designed to be colorful and hopeful, and every page you open up, it has stories that remind you of the good in the world, remind you of people creating solutions to problems. And then even better, at the bottom of every story is practical action steps on how you can get involved in the stories you just read. And it's so funny going from losing Snapchatter of the Year to TJ Khaled to starting a print newspaper where I'm literally, at a printing press with, earplugs in and this loud machine, surrounded by like 70-year-old people who are about to retire. And, they're the final era of the newspaper industry as we all know it. And it's a whole different ballgame. And it's so funny, like learning how to make this print publication in a time where nobody is doing that. And it's been remarkable, and it's made a difference in people's lives. And we've seen story after story of people writing in to say how it's helped them feel more hopeful, or how they were able to give it to somebody when they needed it most, or how it inspired them to volunteer in their community, or donate to an organization they never knew existed, or to even, start a nonprofit themselves. And it's been such a beautiful creative endeavor, and I'm so grateful to get to be a part of it and use this as a tool to fill the world with a little bit more good.
It's super awesome. And yeah, like you said, like it's kind of insane.
Oh, absolutely.
How is it sustainable to create print? And
yeah,
like for someone thinking, well, I'm a digital content creator, then and the positive impacts and the sort of discoverability of a piece of paper or a newspaper sitting in a coffee shop. But how the hell is making physical print product possible?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I'm not getting rich off this. If I wanted to get rich, I would not be in the good newspaper business, and so nobody should necessarily follow my lead if they're trying to become wealthy. But the reality is, I think that there are a lot of people in the world who feel overwhelmed by what's going on in the world, but don't want to be. They feel heartbroken by injustices and want to make a difference, but they don't know where to start. And for them, this is a valuable tool. It's maybe an invaluable tool that makes all the difference. And so they're willing to subscribe to it. They're willing to pay for it. They're willing to not just buy themselves a copy, but buy a copy for their clients or for their coffee shop, things like that. And so I think that is a big part of it. The other thing is there are a lot of brands doing a lot of good in the world. So many brands are stepping up and saying, you know what, we're not just going to worry about the bottom line. We're gonna use our company to make a difference, and we're going to use our company to give back to the environment or communities who are marginalized, or to our employees, or we're going to create products that actually make a difference or are more sustainable alternatives than what's on the market. And those people want to reach people who care about the good in the world, and our community wants to know about those brands as well. And so we have advertising opportunities, on an international level for people who want to kind of reach our community through digital or print or podcast, whatever that looks like. So that's kind of the business model. It's people who are willing to pay for this because it matters to them and because it's valuable. And there are advertisers who see this as a great opportunity to reach this incredible community of people that we've built a relationship with and built trust with. And it's, but again, it's not the smartest business model in the world, because there's this old adage in the media business that if it bleeds, it leads, and there's scientific evidence that our brains are more naturally drawn to bad news than good news, and so we have to do a lot of stuff to help trick people's brains into paying more attention to the good in the world than the bad. But I think that that's an important thing. It's a valuable thing that I know that I'm actively trying to do in my life. I'm always looking for the opportunity to figure out how to create a little bit more bandwidth for my mind to focus not on what the US president is doing, not on wars that are going on overseas, but ultimately on the people who are creating solutions, people who are fighting for justice, people who are making a difference in their communities. And if I can focus on those things, I feel how it affects me. I feel how it allows me to feel more hopeful, more healthy, and ultimately more empowered to make a difference in the world. And that's what it's all about.
So I guess what does this mean for you moving forward, like as a creator that I guess has this like big mission of spreading positivity and good? What does that mean? What's the vision for the future hold then?
Yeah. I mean, I just got off a call with our team, and I'm so excited about everything to come in 2020 and all of the ways we're going to kind of push all of this forward. On a personal level, I feel like for years, the creative challenge for me was, what does it look like to, to make a Snapchat every day, or to use Instagram to tell a different kind of story, or to use, the internet or a newspaper to tell stories of the good of the world. And now, my attention is still on all of those things except for Snapchat. But I think a lot of my creativity over the next year is going to go into, what does it look like to really support my employees and my team? Like, what does it look like to build a team and help them build a life that is in line with what they want? Like, how can I let them be a part of creating a newspaper or a media company that they can be really proud to work for, but also like support them in their own creative journeys and pursuits. So I'm really excited about that front, and also just being like, all right, what does it creatively look like for my company to not just make a difference by making this product that helps people, but also make a difference in other ways by, the company itself giving back to the community. That's something that's really energizing and exciting for me. And then on the company front, it's like, hey, what does it look like to get more good news into more people's hands? And who are the people who need good news the most? And how can I deliver this to them? And so I'm thinking about a lot of things like that. And then also thinking, now, a few years into this, what would it look like to go digital again. Obviously we've got the newsletter, we've got social media where we're sharing all kinds of amazing good news every day. But what would it look like to, because one thing is, one of the big reasons we started the newspaper is because nobody else was doing it. And so it allowed us to stand out in a really unique way. Because, the media could write about us and be like, these wild, outrageous millennials are starting a newspaper. Who does this? And because we knew that we just couldn't compete on digital. Every media company has a digital outlet, and we didn't have the money or the financial backing to do something super unique there. But now that we're a few years in, it's like, what would it look like for us to go digital? What would it look like for us to share more digital content? So I'm excited about playing around with that, figuring out creative ways of doing something different. And I don't know. It's a roundabout answer, but I am excited for what's to come. And I guess the other aspect is, if you had asked me during the Snapchat days, what's next for you? I never would have guessed that I would be starting a newspaper the next year. And so I'm also very curious to see, a year from now when we check back in, like, what's going to be, like, what will have completely changed? What's the dumb idea that I decided to commit to next? And I guess we really will see. That'll be funny.
They seem like good ideas to me. So maybe
Thank you.
We're both dumb together, or we're both geniuses. I'm not sure. Fred, don't.
We're somewhere in the middle. We'll find out.
All right, we've taken up heaps of your time, and it's been awesome to chat to you again. But we always, Brandon, like to end these podcasts with you, our guests, sharing their top tips, preferably 3 top tips for aspiring creators, and that's just from your lens of whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, I would. Okay, top 3 tips. When I was in high school, I had a mentor who taught me everything I know about photography, but she also taught me everything I know about making a difference. And she taught me from an early age, if you have a unique skill or talent or ability or platform, you have to find a way to make a difference in people's lives. And you've got to, find ways to do that publicly and privately, online so that you can set an example for others, but also offline so that it's not all about getting the cred. And I encourage creators to start doing that as early as possible, because the later you wait, the harder it is to start building that into what you do. And so that's the first thing is figure out a way to give back in a way that only you can. If you're a photographer, who needs photos in your community? If you've got a video skill set, who needs videos? If you are a communicator, how can you communicate about something that matters? Number 2, figure out a way that you can bring value to your community, not on social media. Figure out something, whether it's a print newspaper, or it's an email newsletter, or it's a postcard you send out every year. Figure out something that's going to be a little bit different than the rest of social media, and really build that connection with people who are like-minded. And don't just do it for your own personal gain. Do it to help people, and you're going to see way better connections with people. And then lastly, pick. This is a little outrageous, and I don't know exactly what you would do with it at this present moment, but next time that you read an article about, the next Snapchat or the next Instagram or, whatever it is, like maybe it's WeChat, maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's some dumb app that's like blowing up on the App Store. Try to do something really weird with it. Like worst case scenario, you wasted 30 days. Best case scenario, you lose a contest to DJ Khaled. And so, use it as an opportunity to grow as a creator. Create is the core of creator. But if you're just doing what everybody else is doing on the same platform everybody else is doing it on, you don't have the opportunity to, it's a lot harder to create something new. And so go somewhere else, allow your creativity to fly, and make something that you can feel proud of, no matter how dorky or weird it is.
That's brilliant advice. I love it.
Thank you. I just came up with it on the fly, and now I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to use that advice myself.
Yeah. I think so. Well, I think that's all we got time for. Frederico, is that correct?
Indeed.
Nuts. Brandon, I love chatting to you. It's always, I feel super positive and inspired. So thank you very much for joining us. I can't wait to see what comes from the good company and good newspaper and the good newsletter that lands in my inbox every week.
Thank you. And I mean, it truly is so good to get to hear your voice and reconnect. And I always enjoy my time with you and get to meet you, Fred. And I love what y'all are doing, and I was grateful to get to be a part of this today. So thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, Fred, but I feel good.
So do I, Ant. So do I.
If you feel good about listening to our podcast, please share it. Until next week, bye.
See ya.
Create a generation. Look on the mic.